Welcome back to Crawl Space and Missing. I am Tim Pilleri here today with Lance Reenstierna with an update on this potential New England serial killer. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well today. It's a rarity that we get to introduce both shows in the same intro, but we're doing that because we want to make sure that all the information that we have on this topic is released on both of our platforms so that as many ears can get on this. It's just something that's not going away, and we are just navigating through the information. How are you?
Doing all right over here. Yeah, it's kind of a breaking story. There's new news on it every time we Google about it. Every time I open up my social media accounts, it seems like there's something new on this, and there is some new information from last week already. So we're gonna go over that in just a little bit. But first, Lance, let's throw it to commercial, and we'll be right back to discuss these cases and the possibility of a new and active serial killer in New England.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
Okay, let's go over the quick timeline here for these bodies that were found. They are plentiful. As we spoke about in the last episode on this, Lance, New England is not a big region. It's a pretty small region, which I think is part of the reason that this story is kind of coming together in the way it is, where people online are kind of connecting these bodies that have been found. Some are Jane Doe's, some have been identified. People are connecting them even though they're kind of scattered throughout the region of New England.
Agreed. This has been something that I've been rolling around in my head, and I've brought it up on the show. Like, what is the reason that these bodies that have been discovered, why are they all being connected to the serial killer when we know that there are other bodies throughout the country that are discovered within a certain time frame of each other? This spans over a month, depending on if we want to go back to January, but it's a short period of time. That's one thing that is standing out. Also, it's different than saying like the Pacific Northwest or the Bible Belt region. New England is known for being the cluster of small states. These states have the quickly to access and quickly to cross state lines capability. The people who could be doing this, I think it elicits this like sense of an individual is moving from Connecticut to Rhode Island to Massachusetts to Vermont to New Hampshire to Maine, going through all of these states, which is sort of a, not in a good way, that romantic serial killer concept, that Israel Keys concept, traveling between state lines, thwarting all sorts of law enforcement agencies. So maybe that's part of it.
It is kind of painting a picture of a traditional serial killer who does do that, sort of travels driving throughout several states, much like Samuel Little, who we commented on briefly in the last episode, I believe. But yeah, it does seem to be catching people's imaginations.
And it's also very interesting that they keep using the same types of words like bucolic and idyllic. These communities, when you think of New England, I guess you think of the white picket fence, this really peaceful, community-based regions that are being just shattered by this serial killer. And we're from Massachusetts. And I just want to bring up, you showed me a TikTok of someone in the woods just looking around. Like there's a serial killer. Like it's kind of ridiculous.
I think law enforcement has thrown a lot of cold water on the idea that these bodies that have been found are connected. It really does stem from the online community, social media, and TikTok in particular seems to be the real driver of this story. And we are just kind of commenting on what we've seen. And basically in the last episode we recorded, we said this seems very unlikely to be a serial killer. At least there isn't enough information to say one way or another that there is a serial killer. And that's kind of probably where we still are. But let's go over this timeline and discuss these bodies that have been found. So on March 6th, 2025, the remains of Paige Fannon were found near Norwalk, Connecticut by the Norwalk Police Scuba Team and their fire rescue team. And authorities located clothing and personal items left on the bank of the Norwalk River before eventually discovering Fannon's body, I take it, in the water. This is a sentence that we didn't have the last time we recorded an episode, but this would seem to indicate the probability of suicide. What do you think about that?
Thought that the first time I read that sentence, that it was in line with somebody who's going to end their life. I'm not sure why someone who would be responsible for murdering Paige Fannon would leave anything like on the bank of the river.
I also just want to mention the possibility of her just going swimming and something happened. She drowned accidentally.
There is a GoFundMe for Paige's family in loving memory of Paige Alice Fannon, and that's Aliehs. I apologize. I've never seen that name before. You can contribute to that. They have raised their goal of $12,000 and more, but that doesn't mean that you can't continue to contribute to that good cause just to take some of the stress off the family.
And also, the same day, on March 6th, 2025, unidentified remains were located by a hunter in a wooded area in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And there is no information about gender, age, or cause of death. And Plymouth, Massachusetts, it's quite a ways from Norwalk, Connecticut. I want to say it's over 150 miles, but this overarching story kind of invokes people's ideas of a traveling serial killer. So the distance doesn't really change people's minds, I think, when we're talking about these two cases.
Right, because if you're saying that it's 120 miles away, a lot of people will say, well, that's what, 2 hours in a car? 3 hours in a car with stops? Like, that doesn't feel like it's too out of the ordinary. And if someone is trying to cover their tracks and make the investigations more difficult, then they know that depositing the bodies across state lines is only going to invite more law enforcement agencies, which invite more scrutiny and more investigations done wrong.
We said in the last episode that this could be a very old body. There's no information about age, cause of death, or gender, so we really have nothing to go on. Like, this could be, bones from like the 1800s or something like that. And I bring this up because we've actually experienced this type of thing before in covering missing persons cases, specifically Maura Murray's case out of New Hampshire. Oftentimes, if a John or Jane Doe or just any kind of human remains, unidentified human remains, were found in New Hampshire, we got messages, we got emails, we got calls. This could be Maura. Who else could this be? But that's always a tricky thing to say because there are a lot of people out there that it could be. Just because we don't have them on the tip of our tongues or in our brains at this moment doesn't mean that there aren't literally hundreds of other people that could be. And I believe one of those instances that I'm referring to in New Hampshire in Maura Murray's case certainly wasn't connected to Maura Murray's case. It was like an old graveyard found on a property. And then there was another one on Loon Mountain that seemed like ancient, I believe, is what the New Hampshire State Police called those remains. Those words haven't been used yet in the Plymouth body, but it definitely could be a scenario.
They weren't always putting bodies in cemeteries and graveyards in these nicely encased coffins that don't deteriorate. I mean, there are bodies that have been swept away under the earth. Any major city that had an old graveyard or an old cemetery, those bodies aren't directly located exactly where those grave markers are. The bit of information that we do have on the one in Plymouth, investigators did say it was a human skull that was found near Route 3. So that was from one of the articles that we've been sourcing. And again, to me, that does seem like a body that has decomposed. It's probably properly buried at some point in history, decomposed, and just kind of got washed away.
So that brings us to March 19th, 2025. Unidentified remains of a 40 to 60-year-old female were located inside of a suitcase near a cemetery in Groton, Connecticut. And so this is one that we do have some updates on. The FBI is now assisting Groton, Connecticut police, but declined to comment on any other cases. However, the City of Groton Police Chief David Burton said there is no information that links our incident to anything that took place in the state or outside the state. And the update here is the victim has been identified as Suzanne Wormser, and Donald Koffel, 68 years old, has confessed to her murder, and he is being accused of her murder. He apparently confessed during an interview. So he's 68 years old. An interesting age to have confessed to a murder. It tells me that either he knew her well, this is some kind of one-off, or this is a person who had done more and has finally gotten caught, I guess. But the confession part is a little interesting.
Killing somebody and putting them in a suitcase is a form of trying to cover up what you've done. They deposited the body near a cemetery. This might have been a way to pay a little bit of respect to the body. Like, they didn't try to bury the body. They didn't try to throw the body in a body of water to try to sink it. It felt like it was almost poetic that they put it near a cemetery.
Connecticut Chief Medical Examiner James Gill gave a quote. He said Friday that his agency was investigating 5 sets of unidentified remains found this year, and Gill said typically police would be looking for a similar manner of death in each of the cases in a similar location. Gill also said serial killers tend to stick to one particular sex.
Now, what are they looking at? Bodies in suitcases or bodies in some sort of container that are located near a cemetery? If this is like a serial killing and connected to each other, then that's part of this individual's MO. And I'm not sure if this has anything to do with the murder of Suzanne Wormser, but she appeared to have Turner syndrome, which causes your physical characteristics to be of short stature, wide neck, a small chin. She was 10 years younger than Donald Koffel. The other details are not being distributed. I don't know if this is a relationship that they had, like a romantic relationship, but the authorities are saying that this is not at this time connected to the other bodies that have been found.
It does appear that Koffel and Wormser lived together. And the police actually say that a second crime scene was located, and that the location is where they lived together. So I'm guessing an attack happened there. This would seem like a one-off to me, unless this Koffel guy, has acted before in relationships or, perhaps outside relationships. I don't know. But this seems to be either a roommate or a relationship, friendship or romantic relationship. I don't know. But someone that he knew.
And don't expect to get any more information from police because according to WTNH News 8 in New Hampshire, it says the investigation is continuing and more interviews will be conducted. Police will not be releasing any additional information, which is interesting. It doesn't even say at this time. It just says they will not be releasing any additional information.
Okay, and then on March 20th, 2025, the remains of missing New Haven mother Denise Leary were found in a wooded area near a home in, quote, an advanced state of decay, end quote, and Denise had been missing since September of 2024. And so this is a case we kind of spoke about a little bit more last time because, well, there were some suspicious circumstances surrounding Denise's disappearance. Her bedroom door was locked from the inside, and she had apparently climbed out of her window using some kind of cable and then had not been seen again. Her son called authorities to open the door, and they did, and they didn't find her, and that sort of started this search for her that lasted several months, and she had just been found in March of 2025. Hard to say whether this disappearance and death is suspicious at all. I don't know.
This one is also interesting because the son had an account of his mother leaving, I guess, a couple of nights before, telling him to turn the location off on her phone because I guess she didn't want to, have her location be known, and she left with an individual. He didn't get a good look at the person or the vehicle, but she came back, and she seemed to be fine when she came back, but there was something apparently secretive about that moment that happened shortly before she disappeared and was subsequently found. And I don't believe that we've heard another person connected to any one of these other victims that has been suspicious.
Yeah, it's a little unclear on who she was with, right?
Very unclear, yeah. Yeah. And to ask her son to turn the location off on her phone is interesting.
And on March 26th, 2025, the remains of a missing woman whose name we are not going to give out here because the family is adamant that she was not the victim of a serial killer. Her remains were located in Rhode Island, and in a lot of the media and articles you see about this story right now about a potential new serial killer in New England. Her name is mentioned. There are photos of her. We are going to exclude her from this recording and any future recordings about this larger story because it sure seems like her death was not a part of any serial killer.
There's obviously something else going on here. The family is literally screaming this. Like, do not talk about her in this conversation. but just know that there's probably some other investigation happening, and the more her name is brought back into this, it's probably hurting something else. Like you said, we're going to leave the name out of it, and we hope everybody else leaves the name out of it as well.
Yeah, and just a quote here from her family, in light of the recent comments being made, we know that our loved one's passing is in no way related to any type of serial killer. We have complete faith in the Rhode Island State Police and our private investigator that the person responsible will be brought to justice sooner rather than later. We would appreciate it if people on social media /news or other platforms would stop making false statements that our loved one is in any way the victim of a serial killer. ! End quote.
Doesn't get much more clear than that.
Yeah, I mean, they're very adamant, right? And and they even said the person responsible. So it seems like they believe they know who did it.
So don't mess this up for the family, please.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
And that brings us to April 9th, 2025. Unidentified human remains were located in Killingly, Connecticut. And again, there is no information on gender, age, or cause of death, not even anything as specific as body parts that we had spoken about in the Plymouth discovery. So this one even has less.
It is interesting, though, that these bodies are being discovered all within a few weeks of each other. I feel like what we have here is like the Ouroboros, the snake that's eating itself, right? It's just the news cycle is feeding itself here. So this body could have been discovered at any point, but because it's discovered within the same time frame as the other bodies, it's now part of the story.
And the very next day, on April 10th, 2025, in Framingham, Massachusetts, there was another body found. There's not much information on this, but the district attorney in Massachusetts said, information gathered at the scene does not indicate foul play. And that is a quote. They did say, I believe we reported in our last episode, they said that they don't believe there is any threat to the public as well. Still lacking a little bit of information to cross it off completely. In a recent subscription episode, I think it was a live show that we did last week as well, we mentioned that there was another body found in Springfield, Massachusetts. Well, we've got some updates. So on April 22nd, this 45-year-old woman was found near a bike path in Springfield, Massachusetts, near the Basketball Hall of Fame. So it turns out she is 45-year-old Megan Meredith, and Meredith's death is being investigated as a homicide, but this could potentially be similar to the death of 56-year-old Joanne Garelli, who was found murdered in Forest Park in Springfield in January of 2025. It is confirmed that Joanne Garelli was the victim of a homicide. There were, I believe, some markings on her neck. The DA did say they have been making progress in the case, but don't have anything as of this recording on April 28th.
We do have to mention that the Connecticut River does run through Springfield, Massachusetts. Forest Park is a huge park. You brought up that there's a zoo there. You can drive through it. The exact location of Garelli's body is not known other than it was found in Forest Park. I bring up the Connecticut River because we've done the series about the Connecticut River Valley Killer in the show Dark Valley, and we've heard other rumblings online where people are bringing up the Connecticut River Valley Killer. This is on Highway 91. Again, it does cut through Springfield, and it travels all the way up the Vermont and New Hampshire border. This is many, many miles away from where the original Connecticut River Valley killings took place back in the 70s and 80s.
Right. I do want to mention that Megan Meredith's body found near the Springfield bike path, that was probably in eyesight of the Connecticut River. I know the Basketball Hall of Fame is right in that area too. There's the bike path. The river is right there. So it sounds like her body was found near the bike path, certainly within eyeshot of the river. And also new here, on April 25th, 2 men's bodies were found in Salem, Massachusetts. And so this is a breaking story, and they have a suspect. They have actually a homeless man, Jay Blodgett, in custody. He is facing 2 counts of murder. And the police chief told Boston 25's Bob Ward that this case is not connected to any other. quote, "We do believe this is an isolated incident and the perpetrator is under arrest," end quote. That's from Salem Police Chief Lucas Miller.
This was something that came as a surprise when we were looking up any updates, and then you see this headline and it's like, oh my goodness, Salem, Massachusetts now has 2 more bodies. But with a little bit of reading, you find out that this is an individual who is now facing 2 counts of murder. The police strongly believe that this is the person responsible for these 2 particular murders that have happened in Salem, Massachusetts, and it's not connected to the other bodies that we've been talking about. It just has to be very frustrating for police to have to answer this question first. Is this connected to the other bodies? And then they have to say at this time it's not connected to the other bodies, and make sure that they speak so deliberately that they don't have some misinterpretation of something that they said, ballooning into some, new rumor about a serial killer.
Okay, and we do just want to comment on that Facebook group that's called New England SK. And there may be more than one Facebook group on the same subject, but this group does keep getting mentioned in these articles as sort of being the place where a lot of armchair sleuths will go to discuss this. And we've sort of perused this group, and there's a lot of missing person flyers posted. So it's just people brainstorming. But there was sort of some creepy poetry that was written. People seem to have tried to connect this, or sort of taken the bait in, I don't know, I guess deciphering the poetry to see if this was the actual killer or a killer writing this poem, or maybe just trying to get a rise out of people.
Right, and it does appear that they've gotten a rise out of people. This is exactly what plays into the narrative of there being a serial killer. It's this very cinematic imagery of Zodiac taunting the police and using the press to do so. So now this serial killer's writing poems and putting it on the most popular New England serial killer Facebook page, and there are clues in it. Now people are going through, fine-tooth combing it and trying to find clues. And it did lead to authorities to search this area where this person said that there were clandestine bodies. Now, that's not anything that should be taken lightly. The authorities use resources to try to prove this negative. This person has no information about anything, but they can't not do something. And that's what the Detective Sergeant Brent Kuzman told Fox News Digital last week. He said, quote, "So it seemed pretty obvious that this was kind of a nothing thing, but I never want to be the person that didn't do something." He actually used the word, he was trying to get a rise. One of his poems actually spelled out the word hoax if you spelled the first letter of the paragraphs. So it's all decoded, and now there are these bodies that apparently were there, but it took like a full day of work for them to go out there with cadaver dogs to prove that there was nothing there.
Just want to give a little sample here of the poetry, and I think there was more than one poem that was shared, but this one sort of led authorities to, or even the armchair sleuths, to decipher that they might have been talking about this place in Rhode Island called Blackpoint. I believe it's a beach. This poetry is sort of paragraphed out, and the first letter of each paragraph is what people were kind of working on as something to decipher what the true meaning of these poems were. But let me just read a little bit here. "Beneath the ruin, beneath your feet, beneath the threshold where stone gives way to salt and memory, you've all been there, every last one of you, walking, running, smiling, posing. There's a reason your shoes felt heavier." Next paragraph. "Let the ground keep its peace. It says nothing but holds everything. 6 vertical shells beneath the sand fixed in place, heads tilted toward the tide. They were loud once. Now the ocean does the speaking." Next paragraph. "As for Lewis, what a storyteller." Okay, blah, blah, blah. So you can see BLA. Next paragraph's C. Next one after that is K. So it's all like a creepy, I don't know, rendering of poem that is just trying to get people going, the poetry's not that bad, I will say. So it tells me that the person's not like a total idiot who did this. But if it's a hoax, like, they are kind of a total idiot,
Well, yeah, they are kind of playing around with fire here, because they caused the Narragansett police force to waste over a full day using resources, using cadaver dogs. They're obviously familiar with it. they're familiar with the area. There are these ruins that are on Blackpoint. I don't know how famous they are, but if you were to try to find a place to create a fake post about clandestine bodies being buried, Blackpoint is kind of like a perfect one if you know about the Blackpoint Ruins. And I don't know how many people know about. Did you know about Blackpoint Ruins?
No.
Before? Right. I didn't know that either until I started looking this up, and they reference the ruins. So I feel like it's somebody who knows that location. So now law enforcement knows roughly where you're located. So yeah, not smart.
Not smart, no. And an anonymous group member wrote these poems. However, the owner of the group, I believe, actually has the name. I think is what it was reported in the in one of the articles. So this author of these poems could very well be getting a visit from law enforcement sometime soon.
Yes, I certainly hope so, because not something you want to be doing right now. Or ever, really. I mean, again, it's kind of hard to say I have nothing to do with the burying of these bodies that I just wrote a poem about. You know that this doesn't exist, but the police have to do something. So it's kind of hard to say, like, I did this as a joke, is what I'm getting at. Like, maybe this person did it and they were thinking, I'm not saying anything specific. I'm being very vague. I'm just writing a poem. It's my artistic expression here. But that can't be your defense when the Narragansett police force just wasted all this time and energy and money to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess your need to tease people in this group who are genuinely concerned. I think most of this group has come together because they want to find out if it's true that there's a serial killer in the area, and law enforcement isn't saying it yet. Right. I think there's some validity to that. That is something that can happen, and I'm sure has happened, where there was a serial killer and law enforcement will throw cold water on it, but there still was that serial killer, so it's definitely a possibility here with this group kind of doing some digging. But I will say, once again, really nothing in these group of bodies tells me that they're connected. It seems like, if anything, we're going the other way. We're kind of breaking some of these down and saying this one isn't connected, this one isn't connected. The only thing I will say is this situation in Springfield, Massachusetts, could potentially be connected. This Joanne Gorelli and then Megan Meredith, that could potentially be connected if Megan Meredith was met with foul play. Again, this Joanne Gorelli found just a few months ago, not far from where Megan Meredith's body was located. And Gorelli was definitely met with murder. Unknown assailant at this point. Unknown at this point if Megan Meredith was met with foul play, but her death is being investigated by the homicide unit. And
I just want to reiterate something that was mentioned in the other episode, in our first episode that we did on this, that Springfield does have a very high crime rate. It has a high rate of drug usage. This would be a different story in my head if it was in one of those smaller towns, the coastal towns, the Cape Cod towns. And again, I'm not trying to disparage or say anything wrong about Springfield. Those are like statistically proven it's a very high crime rate.
However, I do want to mention that Hamden District Attorney Anthony Gallooni has said that they've made progress in the murder of Joanne Gorelli. He also added that, here's a quote, "Let me be very clear. I grew up about a quarter mile from that particular area of Forest Park. I frequent, along with my wife, Forest Park. Springfield is safe. Forest Park is safe. We don't believe that there is any connection from this murder to Forest Park and that there is any ongoing threat to individuals who decide to frequent Forest Park." So very adamant there that the park is safe. He's the district attorney, so he certainly wants everybody to be safe and stay safe.
Okay, but the reality is that I'm looking at neighborhoodscout.com, and they list Springfield as being safer than only 5% of U.S. cities. I get where he's coming from, but you can't ignore those numbers.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think? Let us know what you think in the comments on YouTube or on Spotify. Of course, we're a video show now on Spotify, and you can leave comments there. But we're curious what you think. We will continue to cover this story in updates. Certainly, if there is more news that breaks.
We are also happy to take any sort of information from family members or law enforcement if anybody wants to reach out, because we don't want to cover this in a sensationalistic type way, but like you said, it is breaking pretty much daily, and we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't cover it in as timely a manner as possible. So if there is information out there from people who have very definitive information, we would love to put that out there as well.